Hi and welcome back to the fantasyfootball.com YouTube channel with me, Tom Campbell. I'm so excited to say we're here for another Meet the Elite video team reveal. I've got Craig joining me this week, so without further ado, let's get right into it. Welcome back to the fantasyfootballfix.com YouTube channel, guys, with me, Tom Campbell. You can find me on Twitter at UtterlyTC. And guys, it is the World Cup, but we still have just a little bit of FPL content to think about. So I want to talk you all through how Gameweek 16 has gone for one of our elite team managers and how we're sort of thinking about our teams as we approach Gameweek 17 with the World Cup now on the horizon. I'm so excited to say we've got Craig all the way from Copenhagen, joining us again to talk to us about how his season's been going and Craig's plans for how his team's going to look as we come into Game Week 17 in a few weeks' time. So, Craig, welcome back to the channel, man. How has your season been going?
Thanks for having me back.
Pleasure,
I think it's going okay.
Yeah.
I don't have any huge positive, non-negative feeling about it. I think it's been a slightly strange season thus far for quite a few reasons, but I mean my rank is it's okay.
It's good. It's good. Mm-hmm.
It's at around 120 something.
Yeah.
Which is better than 1.2 something.
That's true.
I'm not
mentioning
I don't
no
have
names,
a feeling for I don't have a feeling for why it is where it is. I'm not entirely certain yet what I've done great and what I've done not so great. I seem to have had more bad weeks than good weeks, but
maybe those good weeks have been really good, you know? It's interesting, actually, Craig, you say about the overall rank being around that sort of 120k mark. I had Corey on recently who said he sort of looks to be around about 100k after 10 game weeks, another of the elite managers on fantasyfootballfix.com. Is that something that you look to? Do you have like an overall rank in mind by a certain point of the season that you try and get to, other than first by game week 38? Like, what are you striving for?
I mean, it's been said 1,000 times by other people, but it's getting more difficult as the years go on because of sites like Fix, which are making it a bit easier to plan and see the little things which others have seen for a while. Yeah. But I always used to think 100k by Christmas was. Yeah. But at the same time, it's the gap. It's the gap that counts. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can be 100k, but if you're 100 points off 10k, then that's a whole world of difference between being, I think I'm currently 35, 40 points off the 10k, which is nothing.
That's nothing
in the big scheme of things, but it's the number of people between me and getting where I want to be, which is the real problem.
Yeah, so you've got to make up those 35 points on a lot more players now, which is to the sheer volume. Yeah, I see what you're saying, of course. Yeah. And sites like the one that we're affiliated with, the fantasyfootballfix.com, is making it, the tools are out there, aren't they? So we absolutely know that. Just looking at the chips available, so you've just used the one wild card so far, so you've got heaps of opportunity in that second half of the season, haven't you, Craig, to really capitalise on what will be a pretty chaotic time, won't it, with us all being able to reset teams now and then, having loads of opportunities. How are you feeling about the prospects for the second half? Around about the 120k mark, what are you shooting for the second half of the season? What would be a good season for you?
Well, I'll tell you what, first of all, everyone keeps talking about the second half of the season, but I hate to be the mathematician, but we're not halfway point.
We're not.
In my head, I have it as we're about 1/3 of the way through. Okay. I know it's not, but it just doesn't feel like we're halfway through yet. So that allows me to think that there's still loads of time.
Yeah, it's a good point.
To make up. The whole thing with the reset, on the one hand, it's great to be able to start with essentially a wild card with a blank piece of paper. But there are still, I think, many of the issues which have been a thin red line through the game so far this season, which haven't gone away. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't change with the reset. So I was one of those who went big at the back at the start. When we spoke last time,
I remember.
I was quite insistent that these weren't expensive defenders, they were cheap defenders.
You were.
As it turns out, Chelsea didn't live up to expectations.
No, they didn't.
Liverpool particularly didn't live up to expectations. Trippier has been a bargain.
Yeah, what a player.
So that whole big at the back thing hasn't really worked out. But at the same time, I know we're going to talk about Chelsea probably later, but I'm not feeling hugely enthusiastic that when we come back in week 17, then big at the back is back on the agenda, by which I mean I don't think we're going to be able to take advantage of what I personally think was a mistake in the pricing with the expensive defenders in FPL. So that's not on the table.
No, I understand, and I do remember, Craig, when we talked about it, and it's just sort of pays testament, doesn't it, to the information that you have at hand at that time. What you said at that time was a statement of fact. They were the price compared to what you could buy elsewhere further up the pitch. It wasn't a like for like comparison. Your point there was it not. It wasn't like that's not valid. It's just the season's gone a different way, and that's what keeps us, I guess, coming back to this infernal game, isn't it? The continual, dynamic nature of it and how much it changes. So, in terms of the game week 16 that's just concluded, we're recording on Sunday night here. We're not going to focus on it too much, guys, because clearly we're looking forward now. But just quickly, Craig, in terms of how your team's set up and how it's done for game week 16, do you want to just give us the highlights and also, I guess, talk about any players that have been or in the team currently that you're expecting to remain, and let's say injury and World Cup doesn't scupper them? Any players that you think, do you know what, they're going to keep their place?
Only the obvious ones, which will cause no surprise to anybody. Sure. So Haaland's going nowhere because he's broken the game. Cancelo is going nowhere because he's, as things stand right now, he's the only high-level defender who is worth the money. I have Martinelli, who is just too good value for money to drop, even if we were playing. Even if you had Barcelona every single week, I wouldn't drop him. He's just too cheap. Wilson. I have Wilson, and with Newcastle playing as they're playing, obviously he's made of glass, so I have no idea what condition he comes back in from the World Cup, but assuming he was fit with Newcastle playing as well as they are, he stays. Trippier stays.
Okay, so to Newcastle. Any prospect on travelling up there, Craig? Do you think it's worth?
Absolutely. I actually bought Almiron, I'm pronouncing it right, last night. In the forlorn hope that he might go up in price before the he didn't. But again, he's outperforming his stats by a country mile, but he's passing the eye test also by a country mile. So it seems too good value to turn down. But that's the problem. Actually, that there's too much value in the game because the guys who are big at the back are too expensive because they're playing like crap. Haaland has broken the game because he's a permanent captain. You don't need to have rotation with Pep issues aside. You don't need to have two captainable players.
No.
You've got the mid-priced midfielders who are either, up until recently with Madison, for example, vastly outperforming their XG, but delivering fantastic results. Zaha, who in my case scores when I don't have him and doesn't do a thing.
A true FPL troll.
Absolutely. But there's so much value in there that what used to make it, I think, interesting for people who played the game was finding the 5 million, 5.3 million gems who you could rotate a wee bit just to make sure you always had points coming in from different angles. We don't
your own points, outside of they felt like your own.
We just don't need those in the same way that we used to do because there's just too much value in the game this season, I think.
And has that influenced
your? To do about it.
Sorry, I cut across you there, Craig. But has that interest sort of influenced how you've done transfers? And by that I mean, if you're sort of recognizing there's so much value, do you think there's less of a case to need to chase value and actually say, do you know what? I'm always going to be able to find the team that I want, and it's actually more sensible to just wait and wait till the later stages of the game week and make your transfers as close to the deadline as you can, which is kind of different from how we've done previously, because that's how I've been advised by the other managers that I've been interviewing through this series and sort of how I've tried to manage my team as well. Is that what you'd recommend?
Yeah. But there were several issues at play. The first one, and before I go there, I should say that when I first started playing FPL, and I think it's 14 years ago, I was actually only interested, it's awful to say it, but I was only interested in team value.
Okay.
I was more interested in being on the first page of the most valuable teams than I was at the score.
Okay.
And if I'd known that 15 years later my overall rank would be an issue, then I would have maybe paid more attention to the points. But
okay.
But I used to be quite strong, and still am theoretically speaking, but I used to be a quite strong proponent about saying make the move earlier in the week.
Yeah.
Forgetting that 0.1.
Yeah.
Because I believe once you add the 0.1s up, they start to add 2 points later in the season. That's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, I've never, and we talked about this last time, I've never ever been opposed to making a hit as long as the hit is with some kind of
that you can advertise the cost. Yeah, I remember talking to you about it.
But this year, as you yourself said, there's much less impetus to do it because there's so much value in the game that I'm really struggling to imagine at what point. I'm sure there'll always be. There's always going to be game weeks where you say, "Oh, for God's sake, I'm 0.1 short." But there'll be a backhand. There'll be a plan B, which is equally interesting. But the second issue, which is vastly different this season to seasons gone by, is the intensity of the game weeks this year.
Yeah.
Because of the World Cup being in the middle of the season, we haven't had seasons before where it's been weekend, midweek, weekend, midweek.
They're playing every 3 days, aren't they? Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the whole increased physical intensity and the risk of injury and the not having that same need, at least in my imagination, to build up those 0.1s week by week reduces the need to do so. In a normal season, I would be absolutely sticking to my guns, but this season I'm much less interested in chasing the 0.1s and making sure I've got the right players on the pitch come to game.
I think it's good advice. It's backed up by the other guys I've been talking to on the Elite Series, Craig, as well. I mean, I'm looking at your team value that we've got on screen here at the moment. It's perfectly healthy, but it's clearly not sort of around that sort of 103 million mark, and it's perfectly healthy, right? But it's not going to impede you from having the team that you want, is it? That's what we're kind of finding, So, an interesting way of strategizing, isn't it? I mean, we talked off camera, Craig, didn't we, just before recording about Darwin Núñez, who you were on the bandwagon quite early for getting him. Obviously, picked up a nice haul, didn't he, in this home game against Southampton that's just gone by. What do you make of him and Liverpool as a whole? Let's say coming back from the World Cup, Craig. Do you think this is overblown their fall from grace, and you actually think they're a great fancy option ongoing for the remainder of the season? And indeed with Darwin Núñez as sort of focal point of the question?
I think it's two different issues. One, I think Darwin most certainly is because his numbers are ridiculous.
Yeah.
And if he was outperforming his numbers like Maddison has been outperforming his numbers, I'll be the happiest guy.
No kidding. But
he hasn't yet. But Liverpool kind of worries me because I can't actually put my finger on one thing which is wrong. It just seems to be so many things which are going wrong. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that helps by having a lot of their players coming back tired from the World Cup. Right. But this whole, and to give you a contrast, Chelsea and for that matter, Manchester United or even Villa with a really good new manager, they interest me a bit more because there you've got some managers who you think that the club is underperforming the manager. Yeah. Perhaps there are question marks about Potter, but he did a fantastic job at Brighton.
He did.
And I see no reason to think that he can't organise a defence as well as he did at Brighton. Mm-hmm. So and this doesn't sound terribly patriotic as an Englishman speaking, but if England were to take an early exit from the World Cup,
every chance,
then the sooner the players get back and the sooner these decent coaches, Ten Hag and Potter, have time to work, which they didn't really have anyway through the season because the intensity of the games has been so hard. Yeah. That I think that would be a big boost for Chelsea and quite possibly for United and possibly also for Villa.
Yeah, really interesting shout. To see how the England guys do and if they do come home early, actually having the opportunity to train over that month, which is typically a month of full-on football, isn't it? So it's going to be fascinating to see how that goes. And Liverpool, I know, have been a real quandary for so many FPL managers as we've looked. But Darwin, another one, to your point earlier about the value. I mean, you're not having to expend a fortune to get the guy, are you, as well? Looking up front, there are options this year up front, as we've talked about before, which is a nice change from previous seasons. But look, he's definitely one of them, with Salah being so much more expensive in the midfield as well. Do you think there's a case to be made to say he should be the only Liverpool asset that we look to on the resumption of football after the World Cup from an attacking perspective, Craig, with Darwin up top and forget looking elsewhere?
I mean, before I answer that, I would say that, I think we'll talk about some players who I have my eye on.
That, yeah.
But for me, in terms of game week 17 and onwards, all bets are off.
Okay.
Until everybody comes back and we know what fitness levels they are. I mean, Kane looked, well, what Conte said himself, he was absolutely exhausted in the game before last. He's been exhausted I'm not a Spurs fan, I don't watch them every single week, but to my eyes, he seems exhausted for the last 2 years.
Agree.
Almost.
Yeah, it's not a new
And then we have a World Cup. What condition does he come back in? I mean, and this is speaking as somebody who on the last wild card went with Haaland and Kane and Salah.
Yeah, okay, the three.
So I took three. I went for the threemium so-called approach with my wild card. I don't expect to be doing it this time. I'll just say, but at the same time, I'm hugely interested in who comes back in what shape.
Yeah, of course.
I suspect there'll be injuries left, right, and centre, and
and it's a while away, isn't it? We're going to see there are players who could really impress in the World Cup. But look, I mean, guys, we've been on this slide for a while. We were talking off camera about whether or not to look at the game week just gone. We decided not to do that because it's very quickly going to become old hat. So instead, what I asked Craig to do is have a think about some players which he's kind of interested in right now. Obviously, there's a lot of time before game week 17, as we've just alluded to. But let's take a little look at some players who may be on the radar when we come back from the World Cup in game week 17. So here we are, guys. I'm going to caveat this straight away by saying that I asked Craig to come up with one player per position. So one goalkeeper, one defender, one midfielder, and one forward to have a think about, again, from a perspective of if the World Cup was coming to a conclusion and we were coming into game week 17, kind of names that might be in the frame. So we're just going to have a talk around these players and some of the concepts and kind of teams that might underpin them. So let's talk about Kepa from an example, and you've also got Cucurella. So maybe we can join the two up, Craig. So you kind of, from my perspective of getting those names through, we didn't discuss this off camera. But what is it about that Chelsea defence? You mentioned Potter already, the great kind of tactician that he proved himself to be, and coach, I guess, as much as tactician from a Brighton perspective. Is it more him, and you're sort of thinking, you know what, he will have had more time to work with the players following this period, and that you think he's going to get a tune out of them? They're coming off a pretty rough run of results so far. So what is it about the Chelsea guys that interests you?
I think you just answered it. It's particularly that hopefully Potter has some time to work with the players, work with them on a personal level, work with them at a tactical level. He's shown that he's both, at least to my mind, he showed at Brighton that he's a good man manager and he's a good tactician.
Yeah.
And it's been quite a baptism of fire in terms of the intensity. And now, theoretically speaking, there's a chance, if they're all fit, we'll come back to that, for him to work with them. If he sticks with Kepa at 4.5 for a Chelsea
What a
keeper,
price. I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, I hadn't even really noticed
and let's just caveat by saying everybody and his dog is going to have Ward at 4.0. Yeah. So it's Ward plus somebody else. Yeah. There's no reason why you wouldn't have Ward as your second, or for that matter, first keeper. Cucurella, my mind has gone blank.
I mean,
what's his name? The left back, the English left back.
Ben Chilwell. Yeah, the one.
Ben Chilwell.
Injured,
so Ben Chilwell's injured.
Yeah.
I think it gives Cucurella more options to play either at left centre back or at left wing back.
He played under him as well, right?
In James.
And Cucurella playing under him.
James
as well.
Yeah, James is interesting too, but it's the fitness issue which slightly bothers me with him. But I think Kepa and Cucurella could be really interesting.
And a nice fixture to come back to, right, with the Bournemouth home game in 17 as well. I mean, that price as well and the ownership for Kepa, it's the sort of things that I need to pay more attention to. And you can see that we've included some other stats there, guys, which you can get from a myriad of stats over on Fantasy Football Fix as well. But FPL points per game and expected FPL points per game are kind of interesting metrics you can look at there. And I mean, he started awesome, didn't he? Really, Potter there. He had made a really nice start there, and they've had a bit of a wobble, haven't they, with some narrow defeats there, along with that I guess less narrow defeat at his old club. as well. But yeah, I was interested in there. I guess going forward in offensively with Chelsea, less interested there, Craig. Is that just security of selection? Kind of no one really standing out. No, the Sterlings, Mason Mount, Havertz. No one really sort of exciting you there.
I did think that when Potter went to Chelsea, that Mount would very quickly become an essential player in FPL and for Chelsea. It just doesn't seem to have materialised yet. So again, let's see what happens with the World Cup. Let's see when they come home.
Yeah.
But I'm not feeling it, and there are so many options at that price point.
Yeah.
That it's risk-free to go with. I find it risk-free to go without him. I'm not feeling anybody from the Chelsea attackers.
Nor am I. Yeah, I don't think many people will. Can I turn it around as well, Craig? So in terms of players that you've got in your team currently, so the Gameweek 16 team just gone from a goalkeeper and defensive perspective, is there anyone that you're saying, thanks for your time, guys, it's been an interesting first 40% of the season, and sling your hook? Is there anyone that you're kind of completely done with that definitely won't be in the thinking when we come back from the World Cup?
Yeah, you're gonna have to forgive me for looking at my phone now.
No, that's all right. Carry on.
I've got Guaita in goal.
Right. Yeah. Crystal
Palace.
Goodbye. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You're done, son.
Yeah.
Cancelo stays.
Yeah.
White probably stays, but we'll come back to that. Trippier is too good. Trippier is too good a value.
Yeah.
Salah depends upon KDB's fitness. I'd rather have KDB, truth be told. Martinelli, I don't care how bad their fixtures are. He's too good to drop. He's too cheap to drop.
Okay.
Rashford, well, he's on my page right now.
Yeah, we'll come on to Rashford. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I've got Saka.
Mm-hmm.
I could live without him.
Okay, interesting.
I've got Darwin.
Yeah.
I would love to keep Darwin, but by the time we get back from the World Cup, I think that you've got Jota back.
Yeah.
And
Diaz as well. Yeah.
And Diaz back. And it just makes the rotation a little bit too unpredictable, I suspect.
Interesting. And I guess Bobby Firmino's had a good...
quite possibly wouldn't start with him.
Yeah, interesting. And Bobby Firmino still had a good first part of the season, hasn't he, as well? That's interesting. Let's just touch quickly on Arsenal. You mentioned, sort of paused about Ben White there. We've talked about Martinelli and the value that you kind of see in him and sort of saying it's just too good to kind of not persist with this guy indefinitely, unless something curious changes. Defensively, they've got options, haven't they, Craig? You've got Ben White, obviously great value as well. Any interest in looking to supplement him? If you're saying you're moving away from kind of Saka, you've not mentioned Gabriel Jesus as well. Would you be looking to a Gabriel or a Saliba as part of the Arsenal contingent? Anyone that you prefer there?
If I went for an Arsenal defender on my wild card, it would be Gabriel.
Okay. Yeah.
That I can say with a degree of certainty.
Yeah.
However, the thing about the fixtures from 17 onwards is that, Arsenal are, on the one hand, they're 5 points clear at the top of the league. They're playing as well as they've played since, to my mind, the late 90s.
Yeah, I agree.
Or the early zeros. I mean, they're playing wonderfully well.
Aren't
defensively. They have great numbers, but they always they do times. There's something in them which sometimes ships a goal, which I find really annoying. Despite having a really low XGC, but nonetheless, they're playing fantastically well. But if you go on to the fixed ticker, and you look at 17, you look at the next 6 games from Gameweek 17, they're the bottom of defensive ticker.
Right. Yeah.
Now, at the same time, you look at the games themselves and you say, wow, they're playing so well. They're 5 points clear. They're really going to concede in those games. But I've always, ever since I stopped chasing the money, then I've always played by looking at, assessing the fixtures over a period of time. And I'm not 100% certain I'm going to go with an Arsenal defender on my wildcard.
Really interesting, which would suggest that doubling up on them is far less likely, right? If there's already a degree of doubt there.
Yeah, but then there's Jesus, but Jesus, but he has that yellow card hanging over him, which is slightly annoying. But at the same time, and you can hear I haven't crystallized any thoughts whatsoever. These would be my normal considerations.
Yeah.
But this season is different because the value level is so high.
Yeah.
So actually, why not go for one if I haven't got any financial concerns which limit me from going from it? But it was just last night I took a look at the ticker to have a look at
it's interesting.
How things looked for the weeks ahead, and it's actually interesting insofar as the start of this season was a complete freak show insofar as the strongest teams had amazing fixtures.
Yeah, they did.
For the first 6 it was really up until game week 8 you didn't have to do anything because the best teams had the best games, and I don't recall any season like that.
Neither do I. Don't think it happened.
And I think from 17 onwards we're getting back to something which resembles something we're used to. So if you look at the ticker, instead of just seeing, and this is whether it's, just to be completely honest, it doesn't matter which of the various tickers we're talking about. I mean, I use fixtures, but they all have the same, give or take, the same numbers behind them. Mm-hmm. There's no longer a sea of blue.
No.
For anybody.
No, it's more mixed.
Which I think is a great opportunity for... I'm not interested in really starting now. I'd like to see who's fit, but I think it's a great opportunity to make some gains. I'm hoping it's a great opportunity to make some gains from 17 onwards. Because it's not just going to be about fit and forget.
No.
As it has been. I mean, we're all going to have Trippier.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a stalwart, hasn't he? Yeah, there's no reason to expect.
There's maybe 5. Yeah, there's probably 5 players we're all going to have. So it's about who are the other 6.
So on that, I mean,
it's going to swing more between those 6. Is my point.
Yeah, here, and I think it's really interesting. So the fixture ticker that we've got on fantasyfootballfix.com, as Craig alluded to there, you can split between attack and defensive difficulty. I find that really interesting that Fix's algorithm is suggesting that defensively it doesn't look rosy initially after coming back from the World Cup. So just something to bear in mind, guys, really. Craig, let's look to the other end of the pitch. You've named Marcus Rashford and Callum Wilson as more offensive players in the midfield and attack respectively. So, Man United ticking along very nicely under Ten Hag, thank you very much, right, in terms of their results. Rashford's obviously still great value at 6.7 million, in the midfield. Callum Wilson obviously picked ahead of Ivan Toney for the upcoming World Cup as well, and another great value pick, right? 7.5 million. What is it about those two guys that you're sort of saying is particularly attractive? Is it price? Is it kind of puntiness? Is it explosivity? What's the appeal for these two guys here?
Well, after tonight's game against Fulham, it's not quite as high as it was.
No, it's not a game I've seen, but I saw the result.
You didn't miss much. But the reason I have Rashford is, I mean, his price, but price isn't the huge driver these days. Having said that, I'm not suggesting Bruno, I'm suggesting Rashford. But part of the reason is, again, going back to the ticker, you've got the Nottingham Forest game up there, but I think actually the first 3 games that United have out of the box when we get back are pretty strong. It falls off the cliff a wee bit afterwards, but I just have to...
I mean, it's good, isn't it? And I'm just really intrigued. We've got the ownership percentage there, guys, as well. And obviously that is going to change over the course of the World Cup because prices, whilst they are fixed, you can obviously make unlimited transfers now. So Rashford's already, and obviously he's coming off the back of a blank against the Fulham game that Craig just alluded to, they were just referred to then. But his ownership's already 1 in 5, right? So he's actually a player which is pretty well owned already, Craig, in terms of managers who are still partaking this season. He's a player that's not really fallen under the radar, and he's had sort of hot and cold season, hasn't he, so far? I guess that's how he performs in certain times.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm just looking now at the fixtures. The 27th, they're at home to Forest.
Yeah.
Fine. Mm-hmm. The 31st, because that's another thing, by the way, this season, we haven't got that usual December from hell.
No, that's true.
We normally have I don't know how many games in December with the congestion.
Too many.
Make sure you have 3 on the bench.
Too many.
We're not going to have that this season. Yeah. Although so it's 27th, followed by 31st, folled by 3rd, and then it's the FA Cup break.
Yeah.
So there's just 3 intensive games when we get back. And I think he's pretty much of a lock in the team. Okay. So 3 nice games, Forest, Wolves, and Bournemouth.
Yeah, I like it.
I'll happily bank those 3 games and then move him out ahead of Manchester City and Arsenal.
Yeah, it's a nice shout, isn't it?
Fine with me.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I think from when I have watched Marcus Rashford this season, he's performed better off the left. I mean, people get excited when they see the heat map of him playing through the middle. I don't necessarily see him as that effective in that position. I think playing as a wide forward on the left-hand side is where he's more effective. And I guess the the prospect of Ronaldo potentially leaving in the January transfer window is very real, which would mean that Martial would have that spot locked down unless they were to sign a replacement, whereupon you'd be looking at him playing on that left-hand side of the attack, with the right-hand side occupied by Anthony. So I do like that pick. They're a curious animal, though, aren't they, Man United, the last few seasons? Goodness me. Let's talk about Callum Wilson. Newcastle, how good have they been, Craig? What a find they've been this season.
I've historically not been Eddie Howe's biggest cheerleader prior to his Newcastle period, because I didn't think he could organise his defence totally well.
Yeah, something up in a brewery. Yeah,
that was going that way. So I have to doff my cap and say that he's quite clearly changed that around, and they've been solid, and they haven't seemed to have lost any of that attacking flair, which his teams normally have. So they're playing so far beyond their price level.
Yeah.
And statistically, both in terms of attack and defence, that they're way beyond the level that FPL has priced them at. So I think everyone's going to have 3 Newcastle.
Yeah, I agree.
And I don't think I'll be any different.
No. So just on that, I'm going to wrap things up shortly, Craig. But last video I did with Corey, he sort of it was quite keen to point out that Mr. Nick Pope would be thanks for his services and shown the exit door via sort of size 11 boot imprinted in a certain part of his anatomy. So you're talking about the 3 there. So you've got Trippier, a lock, presumably. Let's say he comes through the World Cup unscathed. What a player he's been. Callum Wilson here. Where do you see that third spot, Craig? Do you see that in the defence, or do you see it just being Almiron cut and dried? Do you like Bruno in the midfield? They've got options, right?
Yeah. I've been rolling since the World Cup. No, World Cup, try again. I've been rolling since my wild card with Trippier in defence and Botman.
Okay, like it, yeah.
But Botman was only really there for, I'm going to get these wrong now, I think it was Gameweek 13 and provisionally Gameweek 15 or 16. He should have played in the way I'd planned out the wild card. And that hasn't gone so well. I mean, Trippier he's banging in the assists, he's banging in the bonus points, and that's what's putting him so high, but nobody else is chipping at that level. But Almiron, again, it seems too good to be true.
It does, yeah.
but the issue is, again, I mean, once you have a Rashford, you say, so let's say you go for keeper, wow, he's so cheap. You go for Cucurella, wow, what value. Yeah. Rashford, only 6.7, wow, what value. At some point, we also have to spend the money.
Yeah, agree.
So maybe Almiron will be that cheap option, which I forego. But that's the mentality I've had all season, whilst he's been banging in the goals and the assists.
And it's been costly.
So.
Yeah, but lots of us. And I wonder if that's going to be reflected in a glut of transfers made. And you've already gone early on that, as you mentioned earlier on in the video. It's going to be really interesting, Craig, to see how it shapes up. And look, I mean, obviously a lot of this conversation here is with the information we've got at hand now. World Cup's not even started yet. There's going to be all kinds of fun and games on the horizon. But so those are your thoughts. Are there any other players? I asked you for 4. It's obviously kept it quite limited. Is there anyone else that you want to mention before we sign off, Craig? Any other players that are tickling your fancy that you really want to look out and see how they do at the World Cup before we come back and slap them into the FPL teams?
No.
Good man.
None that I thought about. I mean, I'm not even looking forward to the World Cup yet. I'm sure I'll get into it once it starts. But from an FPL point of view, for me, who comes back fit?
Yeah, that's the main thing.
Will be my, once we have an idea of who's actually around, I'll start to think about it seriously. But
okay. And I love that shout of yours about when the teams actually get kicked out of the tournament, or not kicked out, but when they get eliminated. How long do they have to come back and work with their managers? It is so close, isn't it, guys? We'll be back playing Premier League football on Boxing Day, so it's not long to wait. So I think that's a really interesting shout. Craig, it's been awesome to chat to you. I'm going to apologise to you on camera for all the nonsense we had off camera before recording. So thank you for giving up your Sunday night. And you and I have both been supping alcohol throughout, and hopefully the viewers can understand that. Guys, it's been an absolute pleasure this week to talk to Craig. Do please smash a like on the video on your way out. Do please leave a comment as well to Wish Craig the best of luck as he continues his ascent up the overall rankings, just like all these other elite managers. Goodness, what am I doing wrong and that they are doing right? That's my journey to work through. Craig, it's been a pleasure, man, and I look forward to talking to you again later in the season. Guys, do enjoy the World Cup. We will be coming back to you with more content during this period. It will be a slightly reduced volume, as I'm sure you're all going to enjoy the World Cup, and we'll get back to Premier League football before you know it. But until next time, guys, this is me, Tom Campbell. Find me on Twitter @UtterlyTC, saying good luck for the next game week, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.